Welcome to Adams County Video Magazine.
Hello, and welcome to our very first program here on Adams County Community Television. My name is Terry Havel, and I'll be your host for this series of programs that we hope to present twice monthly. The program will be about the people, the places, the events, and items of local interest that help make Adams County the unique place that it is. Now, if you have an idea for this show, an upcoming event you'd like to see promoted, for example, or perhaps you have an idea for a special feature that you'd like to appear here, then please contact me by emailing me at thavel@adelphia.net. That'll be up on the screen there for you. Now, we're open to any and all suggestions, as this is a magazine format type show. Maybe you're involved with a community organization, or a school, or even a business that has an item that you want to see featured on local TV. Well, here's your chance. Perhaps you're just an amateur historian like me and you have a story you'd like to see featured. The possibilities here in historic Adams County are really endless. At the end of this program, we'll go over the information on contacting me once again if you'd like to have something that you're interested in appear on this program. I really foresee this as being your show, so don't hesitate to contact me. On this, our pilot show, I've put together some features that I hope you find interesting, educational, and entertaining. Our first feature tonight is a biography of a local Adams County hero. I do want to thank you for tuning in, and I hope you become a regular viewer. The names of Pickett and Lincoln, Chamberlain, and even Eisenhower are forever linked with the name Gettysburg. But the most famous person to have been born and live here in Adams County was one Edward Stewart Plank, the son of a grocer and farmer, who went from Gettysburg College to Major League Baseball in 1901. He became one of the greatest left-handed pitchers of all time, playing most of his 17 years with Connie Mack and the Philadelphia Athletics, playing in an era when most pitchers relied on trick pitches, like the emery ball or the spitter. Plank relied on the natural speed he had developed as a youngster, throwing rocks at haystacks on his father's farm just north of town. Playing with the great Philadelphia teams of the early American League, Plank was to appear in 5 World Series and won the deciding game against the incomparable Christy Mathewson of the New York Giants in the 1913 World Series. Standing just under 6 feet tall and a slender 175 pounds, Gettysburg Eddie was known to American League batsmen as the Grim Reaper. He was the toughest pitcher I ever faced, noted Ty Cobb, one of the greatest hitters who ever played the game. Eddie was somewhat of an oddity on the mound. He became noted for his long delays between pitches. He would tug at his cap, kick his spikes, look at the runners, step off the mound and start again. It was exasperating to opponents, but his deliberate style was enough to keep batters off stride. Eddie also talked to himself a great deal on the mound. Batters could hear him say things like, "Only 9 outs to go," or "Only 8 outs to go," as the game went into late innings. He was somewhat of a loner on road trips, and he also remained a bachelor until after his playing days were over. In the winters, he would always return to Gettysburg, and he served as a tour guide on the battlefield. Few tourists knew that their guide was the great Eddie Plank of the Philadelphia Athletics. In 1915, Eddie jumped to St. Louis of the new Federal League and then played for 2 more seasons for the St. Louis Browns of the American League before hanging up his spikes for the last time as a professional. The final decade of Eddie Plank's life was spent in Gettysburg with his wife Annie and their son Eddie Jr. He opened an auto dealership on York and Stratton Street and continued to play ball in an industrial league. He was a very famous and popular citizen, well liked by all who knew him. In 1926, at the age of 50, Eddie suffered a fatal stroke and was laid to rest in the Evergreen Cemetery. Eddie's record of 326 career wins was a record for most by a left-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball, which lasted for 45 years. In 1946, he was enshrined in the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. His Hall of Fame plaque reads, Edward S. Plank, Gettysburg Eddie, lest anyone should ever forget that he was the most famous son of Adams County. Where do those nutty, everyday phrases we use come from? Well, here are a few examples for you. First one means literally everything. Can you guess what it is? Well, it has to do with guns. You know, a weapon will consist of 3 parts. That's the lock. Here's the stock, and I'll bet you've already guessed the third part now, the barrel. That's right, when we want to say going off and having everything, it'd be like the soldier going off and having his entire weapon with him, lock, stock, and barrel. The next phrase means good at first, but nothing in the long run. Well, the early flintlock muskets that the colonials used had a pan that you would fill with gunpowder, located right here in the center of your screen. The flint would hit the gunpowder in that pan and cause it to ignite, sending a charge down the chamber. If you forgot to load the weapon, such as that soldier did, you would get nothing but a what? Flash in the pan. That means good at first, but nothing in the long run. The next phrase means heading out not fully prepared, also having to do with guns. Now, what phrase could this be? Well, you notice this soldier here, he has to half-cock his weapon in order to load the percussion cap. Then he fully cocks the weapon. Well, if you half-cock it, it means you cannot pull the trigger. It's almost like on safety, so you can load that percussion cap. So that means just going off half-cocked means you are not ready to fire. This next phrase means leaving just a bit too soon. Now, during battle, especially during the Civil War, you would always fire your artillery ordnance first, and then you'd send out your infantry. But sometimes communications got balled up a bit, and the infantry would jump out in front of the artillery. Not a good idea, as you can imagine. Today, we would call that getting hit with friendly fire. Well, in this scene, you see the infantry heading out a little bit too soon here. The artillery is firing into their own men. The phrase we use today comes from this. It's called jumping the gun.
We're here at the Rupp House History Center, a project of Friends of the National Parks at Gettysburg. The Rupp House History Center will be opening June 27th to the public, and our grand opening celebration will be held from June 27th through July 6th. The Rupp House History Center is designed to give visitors to Gettysburg a more unique experience when they come visit the town. The History Center will tell not only the military side of the story of the Battle of Gettysburg, which is very, very important, but it will also tell the civilian side of the story and what these civilians who lived and worked in this neighborhood went through when the battle broke out in July of 1863. And at the same time that we tell the military story and the civilian story, we also want to tell the preservation story and why we believe it's so important to preserve everything related to Gettysburg National Military Park and the memories of the people who fought here and the civilians who lived and worked here. And we really think that's important for visitors to get an understanding of that. The History Center will be different because it will be a hands-on experience. We will have several interactive exhibits that will allow people to touch things and smell certain things and really try to learn about things in a different way. They'll be able to use computer interactives, they'll be able to learn how to build things, and really get an idea of what the soldiers went through and what the civilians went through from a very hands-on point of view, which hasn't really been done before, and we think it's going to give people a very unique experience when they come to Gettysburg. Friends of the National Parks at Gettysburg was organized in 1989 by a small group of citizens who were very committed to preserving everything related to Gettysburg National Military Park. You can become a member of Friends of the National Parks at Gettysburg. Our minimum level of donation is $25 to become a member, and that entitles you to invitations to all of our educational seminars that we hold throughout the year, and all of our newsletters and things like that, as well as we also have some special things planned in the future for upcoming members that will be related to the Rupp House History Center. For this summer and hopefully in the future, the Rupp House History Center will be free to the public, and all of our special events that we will hold for our grand opening will be free to the public. Our grand opening week will feature several historians, local and national historians. We will have entertainment, musical entertainment, reenactments, portrayals by actors and actresses, and all kinds of interesting things. We'll also be conducting tours, neighborhood tours, behind the scenes tours of Friends of the National Parks at Gettysburg's previous work on the battlefield, and everything like that. And they're all free to the public, and everybody is welcome to join us if they can. Again, that's June 27th through July 6th, and it'll just be a different experience for everybody visiting Gettysburg. The History Center will be laid out into different parlors. Each parlor will be representing a different day of the battle, including the aftermath. So we hope everybody will stop by and take a look at Gettysburg from a little bit of a different perspective.
Okay, let's play this game. Here are my picks for the top 10 Civil War movies of all time. Please feel free to email me with your top Civil War movies and reasons why. Let's go down the list. First, coming in at number 10, Gone with the Wind. Number 9, The Blue and the Gray. Number 8, The Prince of Players. Number 7 is The Day Lincoln Was Shot. Coming in at 6, I'm going to put Gods and Generals. Number 5 is the old movie Birth of a Nation. Number 4, Gore Vidal's Lincoln. Number 3, can't leave it off the list, Gettysburg. Number 2, Red Badge of Courage. And number 1, Glory. Number 10, Gone with the Wind. Of all the movies made in Hollywood that deal with the Civil War and its aftermath, none is so well known and popular as Gone with the Wind. Made in 1939, starring Clark Gable, Vivian Leigh, Leslie Howard, and Olivia de Havilland. It is a picture of tremendous dimensions, not just in its storyline based on Margaret Mitchell's blockbusting novel, but one that can be truly appreciated as a film about Hollywood and filmmaking. As a first film of its kind, it is a motion picture of great historical significance. Although primarily a love story, its setting during and after the Civil War is what sets it apart. Who can forget the heart-wrenching and powerful scene where Scarlett O'Hara crosses the Atlanta train yard filled with the wounded during the Battle for Atlanta in 1864? Now, one major criticism is the depiction of slavery in this film, portraying the slaves as happy and compliant and contented. This film, however, has stood the test of time and is one that you can watch almost annually and never tire of. In 1982, the CBS television network broadcast what amounted to the most significant television event dealing with the war between the states up to that time, the 8-hour miniseries The Blue and the Gray, co-written by historian Bruce Catton. Unfortunately, much of the film is melodramatic, as the love interest of many of the characters is overdone, and much of the acting is really bad. This film actually did a pretty good job of squeezing in a survey course on Civil War history by compressing events and or modifying stories and events that happened during the war and applying them to the characters in this actual movie to make certain points. As a Civil War movie, its main weakness was that it tried to do too much. You cannot tell the story of the Civil War in an 8-hour miniseries, no matter how hard you try. Number 8 is an obscure film. Although many liberties are taken with the actual facts, the 1936 film Prince of Players is a superb presentation, offering a portrayal of the first family of the American theater, the Mad Booths of Maryland, starring Richard Burton as Edwin Booth, the brother of the assassin John Wilkes Booth. The film is a solid piece of artistry, with Burton both moving and mystical as the famous actor. The sets, the costumes, the early stage lighting by gaslight are authentic in the movie, something you always look for in a history movie. The film depicts Edwin Booth as a genius, which he was, but it also shows him as having to win back the audiences after his brother's heinous act, and this is simply not true. Edwin Booth actually wrote a letter on behalf of his entire family who were Lincoln supporters, apologizing for his brother's actions, and he went back to the stage to play Hamlet in 1866, where he was greeted with standing ovations. Number 7. Like many Americans, I'm fascinated with Abraham Lincoln and the story of his assassination on April 14, 1865. The very best film dealing with this is the movie The Day Lincoln Was Shot, a Turner Television movie. The film chronicles the days and hours leading up to the assassination from the perspective of both Lincoln and his murderer, John Wilkes Booth. This is another film that succeeds in providing historical detail and authenticity, even though much surrounding Lincoln's assassination is still disputed and debated today. Rob Morrow, as Booth, was spellbinding. He portrayed Booth as I have come to picture him after years of studying the assassination. This story needed no embellishment. The truth was so compelling that the producers of this film did not feel it necessary, thank goodness, to mess it up with any subplots and side stories to make it more commercially viable. It tells the story relying just on the facts, and therefore the movie is a great one for those of us who love history. Now check out the reviews of the recently released Gods and Generals, the prequel to the Killer Angels Gettysburg movie. The movie has been panned almost universally, and I'll admit that I found parts of the movie, mostly in the first half, pretty tedious, pedantic, and even preachy. None of these negative reviewers, however, were historians, but rather film critics who obviously know nothing about the Civil War, because the film follows the Civil War life of Stonewall Jackson and other characters like Chamberlain and Lee, and is perhaps the best Civil War film I've ever seen for attention to detail and authenticity. The filming of the events surrounding the Battle of Fredericksburg, for example, were spectacular. However, I felt the characterization of Stonewall Jackson really left me wanting. It wasn't the Stonewall Jackson I had been studying all my life. Now, one of the most famous and disputed American films of all time was D.W. Griffith's 1915 silent classic, Birth of a Nation. On the positive side, the film was a Civil War epic, which comes across like actual news film footage of the actual events. The film itself is an historical artifact that tells us much today about the view of the Civil War that many people had a half a century after it had ended, when people still could view that war as nostalgia and not history. However, watch the film with caution for its serious racial overtones and its glorification of the Ku Klux Klan as heroes. In many ways, this movie is to be condemned, but if analyzed, it can be a tool for instruction in evil and racial injustice. Number 4, adapted from Gore Vidal's best-selling novel Lincoln, this 1988 TV movie with Sam Waterston as Lincoln captures the essence of the man far better than any other film I've seen. Waterston portrays Lincoln with all his qualities, his humanness, his genius, his wit, as well as the Lincoln who suffered from depression, anguished over the war, was ambitious to the extreme. In other words, the portrayal gave out Lincoln's immense complexity. Watching this movie, I feel that I was seeing Lincoln, not Waterston. Now, Mary Tyler Moore, as his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, was less believable physically, but did an outstanding job in portraying her actual personality. As such, both Waterston and Moore were frightfully convincing in their roles. I love this movie. Number 3, the movie Gettysburg is not the problem. People who watch it and think that they know all about the Battle of Gettysburg from watching the movie are the problem. The movie itself is an epic and factual to a point, and it is very visually stunning. But it must be kept in mind that this film was based on a novel and not history, and therefore it leaves out more than it includes, which tends to skew the story in the direction the author wanted. This movie would be much more valuable if it came with a disclaimer to this effect. Now, the character portrayals in this movie ranged from the overacted, such as the Armistead character, to the excellent, such as the Buford character. The jury is still out on Martin Sheen, however, as Robert E. Lee. I thought Robert Duvall was going to make a much more convincing Lee in Gods and Generals, but I was disappointed with that portrayal, and now I'm starting to lean back towards Sheen's portrayal of Lee. Coming in at number 2, the 1951 film version of Stephen Crane's Red Badge of Courage is a very simple film. It's relatively short and has only one storyline. It has no love story. It is merely a study of the challenge a young Union soldier must face with himself in order to come to grips as he goes into battle or sees the elephant with his own fears. Will he stand and fight, or will he turn tail and skedaddle? It's a question that can only be answered when the time actually comes. It can only be answered with action and not the bravado that one may exhibit up to that crucial moment. This film is in black and white and stars a list of unknowns and even non-professional actors like Bill Mauldin. Audie Murphy, a bad actor, but he was perfect in this starring role. This is one of those movies that you can watch again and again, and it seems so authentic. And coming in at number 1, the best and most popular Civil War movie of all time, Glory. This film is only loosely based on fact. They tell many stories that are factual by compressing them, that is, fitting the stories to the characters in this movie who are really fictional, with the exception, of course, of Robert Gould Shaw. But even though this movie is not history per se, it does tell a wonderful story in the service of history. Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman were simply outstanding. Although I had trouble with Matthew Broderick as Colonel Shaw, I kept on seeing Ferris Bueller. Be that as it may, all in all, this is a very important film which tells an otherwise almost forgotten story. As a history film, it's better than average, but as a story, it is first rate.
I just want to say thanks for coming and giving us some publicity opportunity. That's great. On a national level, we hope to get some publicity. CNN called our Legion Post on Thursday and wanted to know details of this event. Said they would send someone, and we hope that's going to happen. But we're glad that you're here locally to give us the recognition that we give our veterans and those presently serving the recognition that they deserve.
Got an email here. It's from Bob in Two Taverns. First of all, Bob, I suggest just one tavern at a time. Bob says that he likes the show, but he is kind of unsure of what the focus of the show is supposed to be. Well, Bob, let me just tell you once again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is a show that's going to be all about Adams County. Now, you'll have to understand that this is our very first show. I have a staff that's working on this show of exactly one person, moi. And so I'm doing what I can to put together something that will help to promote all the great things, all the great people, all the great events that we have here in Adams County. And so I'd like to once again ask if there's anybody within the viewing area, if you have any ideas that you'd like to see featured on this show, whether it be a civic organization, a school, a church, some upcoming event that you'd like to see featured on this show, then I'll be glad to talk to you if you email me at thavel@adelphia.net. Even if you have some kind of a talent and you'd like to perform on the show, I'd be glad to talk with you about doing something like that. The whole idea is that this show is a magazine type show, which means that as you go through the magazine, you turn from one page to the next and one article to the next. And so I hope to have a nice variety of different features on this show throughout this entire series. So once again, please feel free to get in touch with me. And thanks for watching.